What's up, y'all? Cliche Dude Stuff back at you with another A Movie a Day episode. For those of you that don't know how this works, this year I'm watching at least a movie every single day, and at the end of the month, I do a quick recap, a quick summary of the movies that I watched that month, and if I recommend them or not. I am not qualified to talk about movies. I'm just a guy that likes movies, so my opinions are just opinions. And my dogs are being especially noisy tonight, so I do apologize in advance. Kicking things off, I watched Singing in the Rain for the first time actually ever. I've kind of avoided this movie, not because it's an older movie. I like old movies, but I just got the vibe that it was like an overly wholesome family movie that isn't really my jam. But I'm mad I didn't watch it sooner because it is a wholesome movie, but it is very enjoyable. Acting is really good, singing is really good, the songs are really good. Some people may think a couple of the songs may drag out a little too long. I didn't mind it. But it's funny because I watched the movie Babylon earlier this year, and there's kind of a parallel story between Babylon and Singing in the Rain, as far as like actors trying to make that transition from silent films to talkies. And I just thought that was funny. But yeah, Singing in the Rain, really good older movie, and it is a classic for a reason. Next movie is actually a classic as well, just kind of a different variety. I watched Ghostbusters. I had seen Ghostbusters when I was little. This is the first time I've watched it as an adult. And one thing that stood out to me is just how unlikable Bill Murray's character is. For whatever reason, it seemed like kind of like the 80s kind of had a bad habit. I don't know if it's a bad habit, but it's a noticeable habit of making their protagonist unlikable for like no reason. And it's not like even an arc for him. He's just a douchebag, and he's a douchebag at the beginning of the movie and at the end of the movie. And then part two rolls around, douchebag. I don't know what the deal is. I don't know if that was intentional or if they thought this was making his character cool. I don't know, but I digress. Ghostbusters also a classic for a reason. I think it does still hold up. The effects really amazing, especially for the time that it was released. I do kind of put Ghostbusters kind of in the same kind of echelon as Back to the Future, and that may be blasphemy. I don't know, but I feel like you kind of get the vibe of those movies just from like culture or pop culture osmosis. If you haven't seen them by now, watching them aren't necessarily gonna like blow your mind because we all know what the movies are about. But I think they are still worth watching. Moving on, I needed to watch. I can't remember what was going on this particular night. I needed to watch a stupid comedy, but in like the best way. So I decided to watch A Night at the Roxbury for the first time in ages. Hilarious movie, still holds up. Just good, stupid, just a good, stupid comedy, but again, in the best way. And I have, What is Love still stuck in my head just because it's played so much like in the movie. Oh, but yeah, Night at the Roxbury, definitely recommend it. Really good. Again, it's a stupid movie, but in a good way. Moving on from that, a coworker had recommended Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, which I had heard of, but I had zero interest in before she recommended it. And I actually had a surprisingly good time with it. I didn't know that this movie was actually rated R, which, in my opinion, was for the better. Now, making a movie rated R doesn't necessarily save it, but I think it can add some, much needed weight to some subject matter. And Hansel and Gretel, did it need to be rated R? I don't know, but I think it did help the effects. I love Jeremy Renner, but I just didn't care about watching a Hansel and Gretel story. It just didn't appeal to me, but I'm glad I watched it, had a lot of fun with it. I do recommend it if you just want a mindless action movie. Now, moving on to another mindless action movie that I'm actually not going to recommend, Jason Statham's Crank. It's about a guy who he gets this drug that he has to stay, ramped up on adrenaline or his heart's going to stop. Not a whole lot plot going on, which is fine. Like, a movie doesn't have to have the best plot in the world. It can be saved by either acting or, atmosphere or whatever else. This movie is basically, the whole vibe is just, I don't know. It's just high octane, Monster, Red Bull, whatever, go, 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 go. And personally, I just didn't have a good time. There's one particular scene. It's basically assault that they don't play off as assault. They play it off in a good kind of way. Like this guy basically assaults his girlfriend in public, but very uncomfortable scene. That kind of ruined the movie for me, but it wasn't a good movie anyway. But that's going to be one of them that I'm not going to recommend. I mean, it's if you were going to watch it, you probably would have watched it by now anyway. But yeah, moving on. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Really good comedy, good holiday comedy, and one kind of weird thing that I didn't really realize about this movie until I watched it this go around. It could very well be a good family comedy, but it's rated R for there's so much random cussing, random f bombs for like no reason. I don't know what the thought process was behind that. Um, but I mean, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, really fun time, really good comedy. I just don't understand why they went the route that they did, because it could have been something like no, I'm literally gonna lose the comparison that I was trying to make. The vacation movies, National Lampoon, like something like that, where it's kind of aimed towards adults, but kids can still watch it. There's some inappropriate stuff, but no, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It drops too many f bombs to really for most parents to be comfortable watching it around their kids. Having said that, Steve Martin, John Candy, fantastic duo. Of course, John Candy has his little monologue while they're in the hotel that is about being a genuine person or whatever. Really good stuff, top notch. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, highly recommend it. Moving on, Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, starring Chris Pine. And I'm sorry, there's a lot of good actors in it. He's the name I remember. I'm sorry. So Dungeons and Dragons, I'm not a big Dungeons and Dragons player, as in I've never played it. Not because I'm a hater or anything. I just never had enough friends to play it. But so I don't know how it stands up to like the source material or what have you. But I had a really fun time with this movie in theaters, just watching it with a bunch of people. I mean, I say a bunch of people. Theater was probably half full, but we all had a great time. It's a good little, action comedy adventure, kind of in a similar feel to Guardians of the Galaxy, is I guess my best comparison. I love the creature designs. I love the characters in the movies. I did not expect this movie to be as good as it was. So yeah, Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I do recommend it. After that, I watched the second Ghostbusters movie. Really kind of in the same vein as the first one. It's a good movie. The characters, I don't understand why they make the characters so unlikable as far as like the main protagonist, but that's neither here nor there. It's fine. I didn't realize, for whatever reason, I thought the original Ghostbusters were a trilogy, but they only made the two for whatever reason. I don't know if there was plans for a third and it just didn't work out, but there's only the two of them. After that, I watched the movie 65, starring, and his name just escaped me, Adam Driver. Sorry, lots of movies, so I see faces. I recognize like faces better than names, especially when I'm going through like a lot. But anyway, 65 starring Adam Driver, which is basically like a futuristic movie that actually takes place in the past. I feel like the premise could have been good, but execution wasn't the best. It was better than I heard. I heard this was one of the most boring movies ever. I didn't hate it, but if I wasn't already prepared for it to be more of a boring movie just from hearing it from other people, it would have been a disappointment, and it still is a disappointment considering. I mean, the trailers did make it look good. It's not like a offensively bad movie, but it's not as good as it could have been, in my opinion. And you can either watch it or not. It's not going to be the end of the world either way. Moving on from that is a movie I do recommend watching, but it's kind of like a one and done movie, at least for me, and it makes me feel bad because it's the movie Mank, which is about the making of Citizen Kane. There was apparently some controversy about who actually wrote the screenplay. Was it Herman Mankiewicz, or was it Orson Welles? A combination of the two. Did Orson Welles steal all of Mank's credit and all this? The movie's done really good. David Fincher did an amazing job. I definitely appreciate the movie. I think it was Chris Stuckman that said I kind of have a similar opinion that he did about it. Like, he appreciates the movie and he's glad he watched it, especially as a Citizen Kane fan. But there's not enough to really want to make you like come back and watch it again, which is fine. Like, a movie doesn't have to be rewatchable to be a good movie, and it is a good movie. Um, but again, for me, it's just like a one and done thing. And apparently, the story about Orson Welles stealing credit from Herman Mankiewicz is kind of overblown. Like, from what I understand, Mank actually wrote the first draft, but Orson Welles made a lot of revisions that would actually affect the movie for the better, as far as like the way the narrative structure and things like that were done. So, as far as I know, Orson Welles did deserve the credit that he got. Um, but again, Mank, I do recommend it, especially if you are an older film fan. If you are a fan of Citizen Kane, I'll probably never watch it again unless I'm with a buddy that just wants to watch it. And I hate saying that, but anyway, moving on to the new Super Mario Brothers movie. So with all the controversy surrounding the voice acting for this movie, I expected it to be, I don't know, super polarizing, and kind of is as far as between critics and fans. But most people I know that watch the movie love it, and I am one of those people. Chris Pratt did a good job. Charlie Day's in this movie, and I had no idea he was going to be Luigi. As I'm watching these newer movies as they're coming out, I'm trying to avoid trailers and spoilers as much as possible. I knew Chris Pratt was going to be Mario. I knew Jack Black was going to be Bowser, and Anya Taylor-Joy was going to be Peach. But that was pretty much it. But yeah, I had a marvelous time. I am a Mario fan, so all the little Easter eggs and the little noise, sound effects, all that, did make me pop a little bit. But it was a fun little movie. I watched it on Easter morning, and I was the only adult in the theater that didn't have a kid with them, and I didn't even care. I had a lovely time, and I'm glad I watched it, and I'm glad I got a chance to watch it in theaters. Moving on, complete opposite end of the spectrum as far as mood and vibe. I watched a movie called Mean Creek, which some of you may have seen the scene of Josh Peck just like being super vulgar, just like cussing out his friends on this boat. That's where that scene is from. I had never actually seen the movie up until now. A coworker recommended it to me, and so it's supposed to be. I was told it was a super disturbing movie, super sad and all that. And a kid dies in it, a mean kid dies in it, and then like towards the end of the movie, like the other kids have to kind of like deal with that. And it is sad. Don't get me wrong, but the kid that died was the meanest character in the movie, and maybe that makes me a bad person, but I didn't feel bad for him. I kind of did at first because they were, trying to show him, or kind of showing him as kind of a little, kind of a weird kid, didn't really know how to do the social thing, but he goes way to the extreme as far as like how he starts talking about the kids that are on the boat with him, starts telling a kid that he's glad that his dad committed suicide, and I'm just like, I'm not sad this kid died. He wasn't a good person, and he's not a real kid. It's a character. I don't care that the character died. But anyway, maybe I'm a bad person. But moving on to another bleak movie, The Road. This is another one I hadn't seen, but I had heard a lot about. And it's also another one I didn't feel as like depressed watching it as I expected to feel. Not that it's not. I mean, it's a very depressing, very dark, very gloomy movie about a father and his son in an apocalyptic world. But I think I had just had so much build up, so much anticipation about it being such a dark and depressing movie that it really couldn't live up to whatever expectations I placed on it, which isn't the movie's fault. And it's not that it's a bad movie or anything. It's just not as dark as I thought it was going to be. But it was a good movie. I definitely do recommend it. Now moving on to a movie I actually don't recommend, not because it's bad, but because it actually does live up to the reputation that it has of being one of the most disturbing movies that I've ever seen. It is a French film called Martyrs. Came out in 2009, I believe. And I've been hearing about this movie for over a decade, and I finally got the balls to watch it. And it earns that reputation of being a disturbing movie. And it's not necessarily just for gore, which, I mean, it is, I mean, it's very graphic, you know, like people get like blown up with like shotguns. There's a creature or a scene with, I say a creature, it's a human, but it's a very disfigured human, and they have a thing strapped to their head that's like bolted into their head, and they like pry the screws out. It's very unnerving. Um, but that's not even why it got to me. The second half of the movie, there's like this woman. Basically, the second half of the movie is a torture scene, like for the whole second half. Um, and the part that really got to me the most, besides the very end where someone is more or less skinned alive, I didn't expect that. I don't know how that wasn't spoiled for me that happened. But even before that, this woman is like tied up and just basically it's like a domestic abuse scene. She's tied up and just getting punched by this giant man over and over and over and over. And I think just because of how realistic that situation is and how that's again like a real world thing that actually happens to people, that hit me like so hard, and it goes on for a long time. Again, the whole second half of the movie is just this woman being tortured, and there's no release. Like there's, I mean, spoilers, but there's no happy ending to this movie. Um, it's very hard to watch. I do think it's a good movie. It's a very nihilistic movie. Um, but I don't think people should watch it just to prove themselves that they can stomach it. I mean, if you want to watch it, by all means, but don't feel like you have to have a point to prove to yourself, because I I feel like this movie could scar some people, and it definitely did live up to the reputation that it has by being one of the most disturbing movies ever. Moving on from Martyrs, I watched another French film, I believe it was French, called Raw, about basically like a cannibal family. Towards the end, you come to find out that the cannibalism in their families, you know, it's hereditary. I'm not going to say too much about this one because it's more like subtle in like its themes and stuff. But it is a really good movie. You know, make sure you can stomach. It's nowhere near as extreme as Martyrs, but again, it is a cannibal movie, so make sure you can stomach that kind of thing. But it is really good. I do recommend it. Moving on to a lighter tone, I watched the original Pink Panther finally with Peter Sellers, which I had actually never watched before. And one thing, in hindsight, I feel like I knew that the original Pink Panther wasn't about Inspector Clouseau, at least entirely. But whenever I watched the movie, I I forgot. Like I had heard that the original wasn't about Inspector Clouseau, but then the ones after that were. So I only watched the first one so far. The one I think it came out in 1963. And it was good. It's pretty funny, but it did let me down that it didn't star Clouseau for the whole movie, because Peter Sellers is phenomenal as Clouseau. I mean, all the actors. It's a really good comedy, even if Clouseau isn't involved. But whenever Peter Sellers is on screen as Clouseau, he steals the show. And I still have to watch the later Pink Panther movies to give my opinion on those. But I'm very much looking forward to those. I just haven't gotten around to it just yet. Now after that, I watched about 4 or 5 Nicolas Cage movies, because Renfield was coming out, and I love Nicolas Cage. I don't remember if it's come up or not yet, but he's one of my favorite actors. I feel like he gets crapped on way too much. He always brings his A game, and even if the script doesn't require it, but he always brings his A game, and he's always a phenomenal actor to watch on screen. So I'm just gonna do a quick rundown on the movies that I watched. So I watched Color Out of Space, which is a movie that is based off of a, what's the name of the guy? Lovecraft, based off a Lovecraft story. Color Out of Space, about this meteor that comes to Earth and just all kinds of weird stuff starts happening. It's a fun little movie, very weird. First 30 minutes or so are kind of skippable, kind of boring, try to set up the family dynamic and all that. But after that, things pick up. I recommend it. It was a fun little weird time. After that, Vampire's Kiss, which I hadn't seen since probably high school. Um, love it. I mean, that's where most of the Nicolas Cage memes come from. Um, I had a great time with it. I know it got crapped on when it released, and people, Nicolas Cage's performance um, was very over the top. But if his performance wasn't what his performance was, this movie would be lost to time. Nobody would be talking about it ever. Vampire's Kiss, I love it. Anytime someone wants to watch a Nicolas Cage movie, that's the first one I recommend because it is so unapologetically Nicolas Cage. The fact that he like says boo hoo when he's crying in that one scene, I mean, just enough said. I love it. After that, I watched Renfield in theaters, and it's funny because Vampire's Kiss, he goes from someone who's thinking he's a vampire to Renfield playing Dracula, an actual vampire, and the half of the movie that you expect to get is actually really good, really entertaining, with Nicolas Cage as Dracula and Nick, the other guy, Finnick from the Hunger Games. I can't ever remember his actual name, but their relationship and everything is amazing, good stuff. Then there's like another half of the movie about a cop, uh, Aquafina, doing trying to bust like a mob or whatever. Could have done without it. I feel like they just shoehorned that in there just to have more of a plot, but I feel like they could have did more with Nicolas Cage as Dracula to fill out the runtime. But whatever. I'm just glad I got Nicolas Cage as Dracula, and it was enjoyable, and I do recommend it. After that, I watched Face Off, which, if anyone doesn't think, for the people that don't think Nicolas Cage is a good actor, please watch the movie Face Off. You got the beginning, before the switch happens, he's got his over the top antics with the facial expressions and all that. But then, he's got to switch and play a different character. And then John Travolta has to play Nicolas Cage's character. And so Nicolas Cage has to be more subtle. And both Nicolas Cage and John Travolta, I personally think it's both of their best movies. I mean, you can make an argument for Pulp Fiction being John Travolta's best movie, but I don't think it's his best acting role. I think Face Off is John Travolta's best acting role, along with Nicolas Cage. And definitely, if you don't watch any other Nicolas Cage movie, watch Face Off. It will win you over. I'm going from that to one of them that definitely will not win you over, Wicker Man, the remake from 2006. I have a guilty pleasure with this movie, but I 1000% understand why people hate it, especially compared to the original. It is not a good movie. It is not a good remake. Probably shouldn't exist. But it is what it is. It's only good for Nicolas Cage. And his overacting it's just beautiful. Especially at the end. I didn't realize there was a theatrical release and then a uncut version. The part with the bees is actually not whenever he's screaming about the bees, it wasn't in the theatrical release, if I understand right. So that's interesting. But I think Wicker Man's worth watching if you're a Nicolas Cage completionist, but not if you're just like a fan of the Wicker Man or whatever, because then you'll hate it. Last Nicolas Cage movie that I watched was actually one of them I hadn't seen before, and I actually would have been fine without seeing it, which is weird because it is his only Oscar role in Leaving Las Vegas. He plays a drunk that basically refuses to recover, and that's the movie. He gets with a adult entertainer person. Try not to use mean words, but my brain isn't coming up with the right words. But an escort type lady, I guess. So and he tells her, like, the one rule: you can't make me stop drinking. And so yeah, that's the movie. I don't know. I mean, he won Best Actor for that role, and his acting was good, but I don't know if I would have just seen it without knowing anything about it. Like if it was just on TV one day, I wouldn't really have thought anything of it. But whatever, it's fine. After that, I saw The Pope's Exorcist starring Russell Crowe. And the only good thing about that movie, in my opinion, is Russell Crowe. Him on his little Vespa is hilarious. It gives me life, and I love it. And that alone is reason enough for the movie to exist. And that alone is reason enough to watch the movie. Other than that, it's just I mean, Exorcist movies. You've seen one. There are a few exceptions, um, but most of them are just all the same old cliches. It is what it is. Um, After that, another Nicolas Cage movie. This one I hadn't heard about. Just someone recommended it to me. They're like, "Hey, you like Nicolas Cage? Watch this movie called Dog Eat Dog." It had Nicolas Cage, but also had Willem Dafoe, who actually wasn't as crazy in the movie as I thought he was going to be. Neither was Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage kind of starts his little acting thing towards the end, as far as like you know you're where you have the kind of the feeling of like, oh, okay, well now he's doing his Nicolas Cage thing, um, talking like Henry Beauregard or whoever the actor was. Um, it's a fine movie, just about these mobster type people trying to make a big score once they get out of prison and it's just not going right. Um, it's kind of dark, but I mean it's not it may be a bad movie, but I mean it's fine. After that, I watched Evil Dead Rise, which wasn't as good as the 2013 remake of the Evil Dead. Everybody is losing their mind over this movie. I like it, but people, calm down. It is not the like people are ranking this as the best Evil Dead movie. It is not. It's a good movie. It's a good horror movie, but it barely feels like an Evil Dead movie, which is fine because like the 2013 remake didn't feel like the originals and stuff. But Evil Dead Rise, I don't know, like it's fine. I mean it's good, but I feel like it is way overhyped, and I feel like if you go in with the expectation that it's the best Evil Dead movie, I feel like you're gonna be let down. But I mean, it is a good movie, especially the actor that plays the mom does a really good job. And it is good. I'm just surprised that I guess it's just recency bias. The amount of people that are like, yeah, this is so much better than the 2013 remake. The 2013 remake is so good, y'all. Y'all need to give it another chance. After that, I watched a movie I had never heard of, called At Eternity's Gate, starring Willem Dafoe, about Vincent Van Gogh, and it even has Mads Mikkelsen in it for a brief period, and it also has not Pedro Pascal, Oscar Isaac. Sorry, again these names, but yeah, Oscar Isaac's in it for a little bit as well, and at Eternity's Gate, it's one of those movies where not a whole lot happens. Like we're just kind of going through like Van Gogh's kind of like his life, especially like the tail end of it. And Van Gogh, like it's a sad story about he wasn't really his art wasn't appreciated until his passing. Um, and yeah, like I see this movie and then I think about the Doctor Who episode where he, meets Van Gogh and brings him back to the art exhibit and all that, and I cry every time. And I'm not a big art guy, but my heart feels for Van Gogh. Just to feel unappreciated, and then for your work to blow up once you're dead and gone, and you never see the impact that your legacy that you left behind, like the impact that it has on people. But anyway, yeah, At Eternity's Gate is on Tubi for free, at least in the States, so I definitely do recommend watching it. After that, I had to watch another little brainless comedy movie. I watched Dude, Where's My Car, which is funny, but you hear about people saying certain comedy things don't hold up from the early 2000s. Be warned that this is one of those that some of the jokes, some of the references and things like that, definitely can be offensive. If if you're looking at them from today's lens versus like back then. I'm not saying it makes it okay, but just be warned, if you've never seen Dude, Where's My Car? It's funny. It's a little stupid comedy, again, in a good way, but there is specifically like with transsexuals, but anyway, so just moving on. I watched Beau is Afraid, the weirdest movie maybe of all time, in my opinion, in a good way. Beau is Afraid is a good representation of anxiety, and numerous other illnesses, mental illnesses. For me, it hit home with anxiety. Basically, the whole movie, it's split up into like four different uh, sections, or like not really set pieces, but so you have Beau at his house, you have Beau at the doctor's place, you have Beau in the woods, then you have Beau at his mom's place. And basically, it's a 3 hour movie, but if you cut it into little 45-minute sections, give or take, I think it is more like palatable. Um, but so you're going through this movie, and basically the worst thing that can happen, or the worst thing that Bo thinks is going to happen, happens because we're looking at it through his eyes of like anxiety and just like freaking out about everything. And I feel like it was a good representation. The fact that Ari Aster was able to get what a $35 million budget for such a weird movie, we may never get a movie like this again. Matter of fact, I know we will never get a movie like this again. Um, but I definitely know it's not for everybody, which is why we're never going to get another movie like this again. But I do recommend watching it. Just be prepared. It is so weird, but I feel like in a good way for the better. Then moving on to Minority Report, which one of them, surprisingly, I had actually never seen. I know there's a lot of those, but I had always wanted to watch it because I heard a lot of people reference it, and I wanted to be in on the references, and love the movie. It's got Tom Cruise as a Steven Spielberg movie, who I'm not crazy about Steven Spielberg, not because his movies, pretty much all of his movies are good. He's kind of a douchebag, but Minority Report is actually a really good movie. It does kind of drag in the last little bit, um, but I'm not really going to give plot details because I don't want to spoil it. Watch Minority Report. Don't watch a trailer or a review or anything. Just watch Minority Report and form your own opinion. But I think it's a really good movie. Um, Going from that, so I'm gonna jump ahead, and then I'm gonna talk about the last section kind of all together. I watched Spirited Away live on stage. It was on like a Regal theater screen, but it was the play from them, the cast in Japan, like doing the movie live on stage, as the name suggests. And it was one of the funnest experiences I ever had in a theater. Theater was basically packed out. I was able to convince my brother and his girlfriend to come with me, even though my brother's not a huge fan of Studio Ghibli, but it's fine. Um, and we had a marvelous time. I'm a huge Studio Ghibli fan. Spirited Away is one of my favorite movies of all time. Um, I kind of go back and forth between Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle. Spirited Away is probably the better movie, but I love Howl's Moving Castle. But to see how they were able to put this anime movie, how they were able to modify it for a live stage play, and the creativity that it took, and the voice actor for Yobaba came back for her role, which is amazing. Um, but yeah, the whole movie is great, and they got a lot of the little details, like whenever Chihiro does a little thing where she kicks her shoe on with her foot, which is we all geeked out about because it's such a minor thing that the animators took time to do, and the fact that the stage play took the time to include it as well. If you get well, I was gonna say if you get a chance to watch it, but I don't know if it's actually still in theater. Um, but they're doing like all the Studio Ghibli films, so more or less. But definitely watch it if you can get around to watching any of them. I don't know if they're gonna sell them or if they're gonna be on streaming. If you can watch it and support it, please watch it. All right, now going back, um, I don't know if y'all know of the series called VHS. So there's VHS, VHS 2, VHS 94, 99. Um, so I've always heard they're really good. They're found footage films, which already isn't my favorite, but I wanted to watch them just because I'm doing this series and I'm trying to watch stuff that I hadn't watched before. I'll be honest, and I feel like I'm about to lose a lot of respect from so many people, but it is what it is. I am not a huge fan, especially because they're like feature length films. I feel like I would like these so much more as like little isolated YouTube shorts or something. But so VHS, the first one is my favorite, which apparently is a hot take. Everyone loves the second one, which in my opinion is not as good. My only complaint with the first one really is it probably drags. It probably one of the there's like two of those shorts that could be cut out, or at least one of the two. The one where there's like a glitch in the woods, and then the one with there's a guy apparently trying to support his girlfriend in a long distance relationship, but then there's like aliens and stuff. One of those two probably could have been cut to save some time because it's almost 2 hours long and it doesn't need to be. So that's my only gripe with the first one. This second one, they, they try to do, because it's a bigger budget, so there's better like supposed to be like better visuals and stuff. But I don't know. I'm trying to justify the fact that I didn't care for it. Of course, they have the one short of the cult or whatever with all the people committing suicide. Everybody loves that one. That's the one that really made rounds a few years ago. Um, but I feel like even the tail end of that story with like the demon, baby thing, I don't know. It just doesn't do it for me. And then there's Viral, 94 and 99. All of these movies have a couple of the shorts that are like okay. Some of them are good, but the movies as a whole, most of the shorts I was just sitting through. I'm like, okay, let's go to the next one. I mean, I didn't fast forward them, but I'm like, eh. I feel like anthologies can be tricky, um, especially in movies. So like these might have worked better, like doing something like Love, Death, and Robots, where they're like a different episode. They're episodic as far as like TV shows, but all of it compressed into a movie. It just didn't work for me. Again, I'm already not a huge fan on found footage, and I don't know. And I think the fact that they're full length movies, um, kind of is what kind of like sours me on, is like I don't feel like they should have been full length movies. I've seen YouTube channels do better, I think, but anyway, it's fine. Um, but they did lead me to a movie called Siren, which is based off of one of the shorts, and also a movie called Kids vs Aliens, but we'll get into that one next month. Um, so it's about basically these. It's a little different. The movie is a little bit different than the short from VHS. These people were having a bachelor party, and one of the entertainers is trapped or like imprisoned. So they free her, but she ends up being a siren. Um, and it's not the mermaid siren. Before I watched this movie, I thought all sirens were the mermaid variety, but apparently that's a misconception. But it's basically she's just a little demon woman. She's got like wings and everything by the end. Um, but I mean, it was fine. It wasn't as good. I think the short, when I heard they made a movie that was inspired by the short, I was disappointed once I watched the movie because I actually did like the short. I think it was called Amateur Night. The short was actually really good. You had these guys trying to take advantage of these women, and then one of them like just kills them all. I'm like, good, that's what you get. But in the movie, like the guys aren't nearly as bad from what I can remember. So you're not as satisfied when they die. But it's whatever. It's fine. The last movie, and I think I saved one of the best for last. I just watched, what was it, yesterday? Watched a movie called Sisu. I saw the trailer. I only saw it one time whenever I went to watch John Wick 4. And this trailer played before the movie. And they didn't advertise it as such, but I kind of heard it was like, it's John Wick, but set in World War II. And I can see that. It's funny because I watched John Wick 4, which is almost a 3 hour movie. Then I watched Sisu, which is an hour and a half. I'm like, oh, okay. Not to say that, like, I love the movie. It could have been a little bit longer, but I think the fact that it's only an hour and a half might be better to introduce people who wouldn't have watched a longer movie. So maybe people who didn't want to sit through a 3 hour John Wick movie may watch the Sisu movie. But one part that stands out to me, so I feel like, I may be making this up, but I feel like in the trailer, they did a part about, don't worry, the dog doesn't die, because they have a dog in the movie similar to John Wick. But then, and this is a spoiler, but I mean, it's not really related to the plot or the story, really. Um, there's a horse in the movie that gets obliterated. And it's like, it's not a random horse. It is our main protagonist. His horse steps on a mine and blows up. And then he's like cuddling the thing's head like during that scene. I'm like, this is so much worse than a puppy getting killed off screen. They advertise like, oh, don't worry, the dog doesn't die, but they don't tell you the freaking horse explodes. Um, But no, Sisu, really good movie, really fun time, borderline unbelievable. Like John Wick, how with all the falling that he did. There's a scene towards the end of Sisu that's like, okay, he would be dead. There's a lot of scenes like that, but especially towards the end, it's like he would be dead. But it's fine. I definitely do recommend watching it. I don't. It may still be in theaters by the time this video goes up. But yeah, definitely recommend watching it. Okay, we're at 40 minutes, and I think this is going to be one of the shorter ones. As you can tell, I'm trying to compress these a little bit more when I can. I'm trying not to ramble as much. But yeah, if y'all have any requests, recommendations, suggestions, or questions, please leave them in the comments below. I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and I will see y'all later.